2 weeks ago, I was sitting in a boardroom with executives half my age. One of them, a confident 32-year-old, pitched an idea that I knew would fail. I'd seen it fail 3 times before in my career. But here's what nobody tells you about turning 65. When you speak up, everything changes. Not because you're older, because you've become something you never expected to become. I want to share something with you today that absolutely nobody warned me about. Something that happened so gradually I didn't even notice it until recently. And if you're watching this and you're younger, trust me, you're going to want to hear this, because it's coming for you too, whether you're ready or not. Here's the thing that shocked me most about hitting 65. I stopped caring what people think. And I don't mean that in some cliché midlife crisis way. I mean I genuinely, physically, cannot bring myself to care about impressing strangers anymore. It's like someone flipped a switch in my brain. Remember when you were 25, lying awake at night, replaying that awkward thing you said at a party? That part of your brain, it just turns off. Last month, I wore my gardening clothes to the grocery store. Dirt on my knees, old t-shirt with a hole in it. The old me would have died of embarrassment. The 65-year-old me. I grabbed my lettuce and walked out whistling. A woman actually stared at me. I smiled and waved, because here's what I've learned. Her opinion of my outfit has zero impact on my life. Zero. But that's just the surface level stuff. Let me tell you what really happens at this age that nobody prepares you for. You know how everyone says, with age comes wisdom? That's not quite right. It's not wisdom that comes with age. It's something much more valuable. It's the ability to see patterns. I was in that boardroom, listening to that 32-year-old pitch his revolutionary new marketing strategy, and I could see exactly, and I mean exactly, how it would play out. Not because I'm smarter than him, because I've watched this exact scenario unfold before, multiple times. It's like having a time machine, but instead of traveling through time, you've just lived long enough that everything starts to repeat. Different players, same game, and suddenly you're standing there with this strange power. You can see 6 months into the future, because you've already lived this 6 months back in 1997, and again in 2004, and again in 2015. But here's where it gets tricky, and this is the part that nobody, and I mean nobody, warns you about. When you're 65 and you try to share this pattern recognition, this hard-earned foresight, people don't always want to hear it. That young executive, he nodded politely when I spoke up. He even said, "That's a good point." Then he did exactly what he was going to do anyway. And you know what? I've learned to be okay with that too. Because here's the brutal truth about authority and age that our society doesn't tell you. We live in a culture that worships youth and innovation, but secretly craves the stability that only experience can provide. It's this weird contradiction. Companies want fresh perspectives and new blood. But when the chips are down, when millions of dollars are on the line, guess who they call into the room? The grey hairs. I've watched this dance play out hundreds of times now. The young executives make the sexy decisions, launch the bold initiatives, get the headlines. And then quietly, someone like me gets pulled into an office. "We need your thoughts on this," can you take a look at our strategy? What would you do? It happened just last week. Different company, different crisis, same story. They'd made a decision 6 months ago that I'd quietly advised against. Now they were hemorrhaging money and couldn't figure out why. I walked in, took one look at their reports, and saw it immediately. Because I've seen this pattern before, many times before. But here's what's fascinating, and this is going to sound strange. I don't feel vindicated when this happens. I used to, back when I was 50, still trying to prove myself. Now I just feel this calm sense of purpose. Like a chess master watching beginners struggle with a puzzle they've solved 1,000 times. There's no ego in it anymore. Just utility. Let me tell you about the exact moment I realized this shift had happened in me. It was about a year ago. I was consulting for a tech startup. Yes, at 64, I was the oldest person in a building full of 20-somethings, with standing desks and kombucha on tap. They'd brought me in because their previous strategy had imploded, though they didn't phrase it that way. They said they wanted diverse perspectives. During my first week, I sat in on a product meeting. These brilliant kids, and they were brilliant, don't get me wrong, were solving a problem. They'd been at it for 3 weeks, whiteboard covered in diagrams, late nights, catered dinners, the works. I watched them for about 20 minutes. Then I asked a question. Just one question. Have you considered approaching this from the user's perspective instead of the technology's perspective? The room went quiet. Then one of the developers said, "Oh my God." Within 2 hours they'd solved it. 3 weeks of work, undone by one question from the old guy in the corner. But here's the kicker. I didn't figure that out by being smart. I figured it out because I've seen teams get lost in technical complexity, exactly like this, about 50 times in my career. I've been that person, lost in the details, missing the obvious. I've watched others do it. I've cleaned up the mess afterward, over and over and over. That's when it hit me. I'm not valuable because I'm clever. I'm valuable because I've failed more times than most people have tried. And that realization changed everything. See, when you're young, you think authority comes from being right, from having the best ideas, from winning arguments. I spent my 30s and 40s trying to be the smartest person in the room. I'd stay up late prepping for meetings, memorizing facts, building unbeatable cases for my proposals. What a waste of energy that was. Now, at 65, I've learned something that nobody teaches you in business school. Nobody mentions in leadership books. Real authority, the kind that actually moves mountains, comes from being useful, not from being right, from being useful. Let me show you what I mean. Last month I was in a strategy session. The CMO, this sharp 40-year-old woman, was pushing hard for a rebrand. She had data, she had mock-ups, she had a whole presentation. It was impressive. The CEO was leaning toward approving it. $2 million budget. Old me would have built a counter-argument, would have found holes in her data, would have embarrassed her in front of the CEO to prove my point. New me said, "That's an interesting approach. Can I ask, what did you learn from the rebrand attempt in 2019? Silence. Nobody remembered there was a rebrand attempt in 2019. I was the only person in that room who'd been there. I pulled up the old files that night, sent them around, similar strategy, similar budget, failed spectacularly because they'd missed one crucial factor about their customer base. The CMO read the files. Next morning, she came to my office. "Thank you," she said. "You just saved me from making the same mistake." She adjusted her strategy. It launched last week. Early results are fantastic. Did I win that exchange? No, she did. And that's the whole point. This is what authority looks like. At 65, it's not about being the alpha in the room. It's about being the institutional memory, the pattern recognition engine, the person who's seen this movie before and can whisper the ending before it happens. But, and this is crucial, only if people want to hear it. And that brings me to the hardest lesson of all, the one that took me the longest to learn, the one that still stings sometimes, even now. Sometimes they don't want to hear it. Sometimes they need to make their own mistakes. I've got a friend, brilliant guy, runs his own consulting firm. He's 67. Last year, his son took over day-to-day operations. My friend watched his son make decision after decision that he knew would backfire. Watched him ignore advice. Watched him learn things the hard way. "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked. He looked at me and said something I'll never forget. Because he needs his own scars. If I give him mine, they won't mean anything. That hit me like a truck. All these patterns I can see, all this wisdom I've accumulated, all this authority I've built, it's mine. It came from my failures, my bruises, my late nights staring at the ceiling wondering how I'd screwed up so badly. You can't transfer that. You can't download that into someone else's brain. The best you can do is be there, be available, be useful when they're ready to listen. And you know what's wild? Once I accepted that, once I stopped trying to force people to benefit from my experience, they started asking for it more. It's like the universe has this perverse sense of humor. Chase authority, and it runs from you. Let it go, and it finds you. These days I get calls, emails. "Hey, can I pick your brain about something? Do you have 20 minutes? I'm dealing with a situation and I thought of you." I always say yes. Not because I need the ego boost. That ship has sailed. I say yes because I remember being 32, 40, 50, making mistakes that someone could have helped me avoid. And I remember the handful of people who were patient enough to help me, even when I was too proud to realize I needed it. That's the other thing about 65. You start thinking about legacy differently. Not like, what will people say at my funeral legacy? More like, what ripples will I leave behind? Every person I help avoid a mistake I made, every pattern I point out that saves someone time, every question I ask that unlocks someone else's solution, those are ripples. They'll spread out long after I'm gone. That young developer who solved his problem after my question, he'll remember that approach. He'll use it again. Maybe he'll teach it to someone else. That's authority, real authority. Not the kind that comes from a title or a corner office, the kind that comes from being genuinely useful to other people's lives. But here's what I want you to understand, especially if you're watching this and you're younger. This authority, this pattern recognition, this usefulness, it's not something that just happens when you turn 65. It's something you build, day by day, failure by failure, lesson by lesson. Every mistake you make right now, every project that fails, every stupid decision that keeps you up at night, you're building pattern recognition. You're creating your future authority, but only if you pay attention, only if you actually learn from it. I've met plenty of 65-year-olds who learned nothing, who made the same mistakes over and over, who never developed pattern recognition because they never took responsibility for their failures. Age alone doesn't give you wisdom. Age plus attention plus humility, that's the formula. And humility is the secret ingredient nobody talks about. Because here's the thing, the more patterns you recognize, the more you realize how much you still don't know. The more expertise you develop, the more you understand the limits of that expertise. I'm an authority on business strategy in my industry. I've got 40 years of pattern recognition in that specific domain. But put me in front of a social media algorithm, or a cryptocurrency question, or a climate science debate, and I'm just another guy with opinions. Knowing the difference, knowing where your authority ends, that's crucial. I see people my age all the time who think because they're experts in one thing, they're experts in everything. They're not. They're just old people with loud opinions. There's a difference. Real authority knows its boundaries. Real authority says, I don't know, when it doesn't know. Real authority listens as much as it speaks. So what does this all mean? What's the point of everything I'm telling you? If you're young, watching this, wondering what's ahead, here's what nobody told me. Your value doesn't peak in your 30s or 40s. It transforms. You trade speed for depth. You trade innovation for pattern recognition. You trade ego for usefulness. And if you do it right, you become more valuable, not less, just in a completely different way than you imagined. If you're my age, maybe you're feeling what I felt a few years ago. Invisible, obsolete, watching younger people take the spotlight. Let me tell you, that feeling is a doorway. Walk through it. On the other side is a different kind of power. Quieter, deeper, more sustainable. Your authority at this age isn't about commanding a room. It's about being the person others seek out when they need truth, when they need perspective, when they need someone who's seen the pattern before. That's your superpower. Use it wisely, use it generously, use it without ego, and for God's sake, be patient with people who aren't ready to hear it yet. They will be, eventually, and when they are, be there, because that's what this whole thing is really about. Not authority for authority's sake, authority in service of something bigger, authority as a form of generosity. I'm 65, I've made more mistakes than most people will ever make. I've failed more than I've succeeded. I've been wrong more often than I've been right. And somehow, impossibly, that's made me valuable. Nobody warned me that would happen. Nobody told me that my scars would become my credentials. Nobody explained that authority isn't something you take. It's something people give you when you've proven you're useful enough, humble enough, and patient enough to deserve it. Now you know. And if you're lucky, 30 or 40 years from now, you'll be sitting in a boardroom, watching a brilliant young person about to make a familiar mistake, and you'll know exactly what to say. Not to prove you're smart, but to be useful. That's the real secret. That's what nobody warns you about. And honestly, it's better than being 25 ever was.